Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sam's Healing Podcast. My name is Sam. I am overjoyed today as a great friend, a new friend. Dr. Jake Porter has come in to be with me. Dr. Jake, tell everybody, for the new visitors, the new subscribers, those that maybe aren't as familiar with some of the things that you do. You've obviously started to blanket Instagram with so much helpful, but compassionate information. I love how kind you are as you continue to help people. So walk them through who you are, what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I'm a licensed professional counselor based out of Houston, Texas. I work with folks from all over the world, though, who come to Houston for the most part and do intensive. So I've developed several different intensive processes to help people, help couples specifically after the discovery of betrayal. Disclosure intensives, something I call couples grief work, relational dynamics. So that's a lot of the work that I do. I also love getting to speak and talk about this stuff. So thank you for having me on. Most important though, I am a husband to Kristen, and I am father to Magnolia Jane and Lottie Joe. And yeah. So
those are good Texas names right there. Let me tell you.
How about it? That's right.
That's fantastic. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's awesome. Yes. Today, I thought we'd launch right into it. We talked a little bit off camera about narcissism and narcissistic traits. Mm-hmm. And in this world, two of the most overused diagnoses in many ways for those that struggle to come to the point of infidelity, disclosure, discovery is narcissism and sexual addiction. And so many people can run with the idea that, oh, I'm in a relationship with a narcissist and he or she is just a narcissist and there's no hope and there's nothing that can be done to save our relationship.
Yeah.
Or people come to the point where they get a little bit of education and they understand narcissistic traits and they realize, wow, he or she's not a narcissist, but they really are narcissistic. So for those that are trying to wrap their mind around what the truth is and how to really navigate this, what's an easy definition of narcissism that you use? And what's the difference between a narcissist and someone who is highly narcissistic or has narcissistic traits?
Thank you. That's a great question. It's a big question. But
it's a lot.
It's a lot, but it's okay. Hey, no, let's do it. I can do it. Yeah, no. I actually love talking about narcissism. I really do. And for a lot of reasons, but one is because, and I promise I am going to get around to answering your questions, but I love to talk about this because I think misinformation is really harmful on this particular topic. It's harmful to the betraying partner and the betrayed partner. And there's a lot of opportunity for misinformation on narcissism on the internet. I'm just going to be real. I'm going to say some things that have gotten me in trouble with some colleagues, but the truth is the truth. There's a lot of money to be made in so-called narcissistic abuse recovery programs. And I'm not saying there's not a such thing as narcissistic abuse. I'm not saying that there aren't good programs around that out there, but there's a lot of money to be made. And there was a spike a couple years ago where it was like all of a sudden everybody was a narcissist and everything was narcissistic abuse. Yes. And I can tell you firsthand, I have worked with couples who that frame of mind actually did them harm.
Right.
And so trying to unring that bell is difficult. So all that to say, thank you for the question where we can talk about this, from a bit of an evidence-based point.
Right.
So when it comes to defining narcissism, I mean, the literal word narcissism comes from the Greek myth about Narcissus who, falls in love with his own image and all of this, but you can go there if you want to. Clinically, though, we're looking at four things. Okay. 4 things that make up narcissism. 2 of them are in reference to the person's sense of self.
Right.
And 2 of them are in reference to the person's experience and capacity in relationships. Okay. So the two things in reference to self are that in terms of their identity, their sense of self comes primarily from their work, their productivity, their bank account, right? Like their identity is more about something more externalized, if that makes sense, right?
It makes total sense.
Okay. And then the second thing in reference to self is what we call self-direction, that they only think about things. I shouldn't say only. Their goals come from how others are going to see them.
Right. So they're managing their image off the chart.
They're managing their image. So in other words, they're going to either have these really, really, really high personal standards based on making sure others see them in a certain way, but they can also have really, really low personal standards.
Absolutely.
Because they think that they're entitled. So again, those two things is that identity thing where they're getting this identity from things out here to inflate their sense of selves, and then their self-direction. It's not like a true choice coming from just their own desire, if that makes sense.
And I heard one therapist said to me, she said, one of the dimensions of narcissism is massive self-absorption.
Mm-hmm.
In everything, conversation, betrayal, infidelity, acting out, you name it. It's just one of the major definitions. Do you think that's fair?
I do. And that ties to the identity piece where it's like, man, they have this exaggerated appraisal of themselves.
It's still
but here's what's interesting. Inflated or deflated. There's actually a form of narcissism where, am I allowed to cuss a little bit on your?
Please. It makes me feel so much better.
A tiny bit. Okay. So there's the snowflake narcissist who is so easily like offended. You say one little thing and it's this explosion of a narcissistic injury. So there's the snowflake narcissist, but then there's the shitflake narcissist.
Yeah.
Where, oh, well, I'm just terrible. Oh, I'm just awful. I'm just right. And there's this deflated thing, but it also comes out, I said there were two categories around sense of self. The two around interpersonal, one of them is about empathy, specifically an impaired ability to do the empathy thing. But here's what's interesting. They're really pretty good at attuning to others and reading people, but only if they perceive it as being relevant to themselves.
Correct. So apparent. So let me ask you, I can hear the betrayed. I can feel the betrayed. Is there hope for one? Is there hope for the narcissist? Two, is there hope for someone who's highly narcissistic? Because I know that the betrayeds are sitting here, male or female betrayed, are sitting here going, so what you're telling me is dark, but is there any hope for them?
Yeah. There's absolutely hope for sure. Like 100%. I have zero qualms saying that. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into that,
Yes.
But I can tell you, I have people with full on NPD sit right behind me, in these chairs on that couch back there, and with proper treatment, proper, motivation, they get better. They actually learn skills and they expand their capacity and they learn to do intimacy in a way that isn't just about regulating their own self-esteem, but really something that's truly mutual. And so, yeah, even people with full-on personality disorders, if they are willing, if they will get to a place of willingness, can find relief. I want to speak to those who are narcissistic, who don't have the full-on personality disorder. And if we need to parse that out, we can. But here's what I want to say about those who are narcissistic. I've never met an addict who doesn't have narcissistic traits
Yes.
early on, either while they're in active addiction or early on in recovery.
It's a brilliant statement. And you're not the only one that says that. I was trained by people who have said the exact same thing. I'm just thrilled that you said it, which transitions into, okay, if there's a betrayed out there and they're in relationship, married or just in a committed relationship with someone who's massively narcissistic, they don't have the full disorder. It can be so alienating for the betrayed because everything turns into a conversation about the unfaithful. No matter how delicately the betrayed approaches it, everything turns, everything spins. It becomes like they are on this island and they feel tortured and lost. And oftentimes, by the time they get to you, by the time they get to me, they feel so hopeless that there's going to be any change, because it's like every situation, every conversation rather, turns into managing them, caring for them, making sure that they're okay. How does the betrayed, number one, find hope? Number two, what are some nuances that the betrayed can use? Because it's massively exhausting for the betrayed when they're dealing with someone highly narcissistic.
Sure. Yeah. So, one thing I think is important to say for the safety of everyone and the good of everyone involved, betrayer or the betrayed, is if those narcissistic tendencies are not getting better as someone is attempting to walk out some recovery, then there needs to be some investigation going on. Because either number one, they're not really in recovery. They're still acting out in some form, because the way addiction affects the brain, it's going to present with narcissistic traits. It's going to happen. Addiction is going to impair the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex does the self-reflection and the empathy and the impulse control and, appreciation for complexity and nuance and all of that. And so if there's not real sobriety, then those narcissistic behaviors, traits are going to continue. If there is sobriety, but the narcissistic traits are continuing, okay, what else might there be? And it could be a full-on personality disorder, but it could be some other things too. But it's worth the investigation. So that's one thing I would say is like, yeah, get curious.
Right.
And then I think that has to be paired with boundaries. Man, doesn't it seem like we always come back to boundaries?
Always.
But I wish if there were one thing that I could gift every betrayed partner, it would be for them to understand the degree to which they really can hold all the power if they'll step into it.
It's such a tough spot. I do that a lot, but it's funny how we can say that, and then we're talking to a betrayed, but they have their own trauma, their own childhood developmental trauma, and they're trying to navigate through. Absolutely. You want me to hold a boundary when my dad or my mom and our family? I mean, it can feel like they're climbing to Mount Everest. Everybody's trying to climb Mount Everest nowadays, right? It feels like there's two. They're trying, and it can be so tough. How do you help those that boundaries is so foreign to them? They're like, Sam, Dr. Jake, boundaries. Yeah. How do you help that person? Do you start them from ground zero? Is it you give them the gold standard book on boundaries and you start here? How is it that you help them navigate through it?
Yeah, well, I do have a webinar on boundaries, and I'm happy to, like any listener, I'll create some coupon code or something, and anyone who wants it, we'll give it to them for 50% off or something like that. And it really is one of my most favorite. I've done tons of webinars. It's one of my top favorite webinars that I've ever done, because the power of boundaries is in accepting where you're powerless. So if I'm saying to my betraying partner, you've got to, you're going to, right? that is going to backfire. But if I say to them, I can't make you go get assessed for a co-occurring disorder. I can't make you go see and sit for this psychological evaluation. That's your choice. But if you choose not to, that informs me and sets me up for the next choice I get to make.
Right.
Now, I want to recognize something that I think is really important, and that is that in our society, and I was just speaking with a betrayed partner this morning where this is the case for her, there are a lot of women who gave up their careers outside the home to stay home and raise their children, which is an honorable, wonderful
Absolutely.
choice to make. But what it does is then if this happens to them later in life, it's not as easy for them to even consider some of the harder choices. That's a reality I want to acknowledge. The other side of that is they still have choices to make.
Right.
Right. And the only way to get to a place where you like the choices you have, if you don't like any of the choices you have, the only place to get to the place where you like the choices is to make the choices you have first.
Right.
To get you there. Right. And so saying, I need you to go get further evaluation. I need you to be in DBT treatment. This is what I'm asking. You get to choose to respect that or not, but that's going to set me up for my next choice. And here's where it's really painful with folks who have full on narcissism is they may choose not to.
Yeah.
And it might speed up the process of the end of a relationship. And as painful as that is, though, my experience, easy for me to say on the outside, but my experience is, my goodness, it's better than it being drawn out another year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of that abuse.
Yeah. Because it's debilitating.
Absolutely.
I've talked to so many betrayed who have labored and worked, especially the betrayed male who feels even more like the albatross because they already feel so different and alone that their wife is cheated because in their mind, only men cheat. So they're trying to wrap their mind around that. Number two, they struggle with, man, I so desperately want our relationship to work and I want you to go get help and I'm pleading and I'm pleading and I'm pleading. And then they just don't take action. And so, which I think would be great. We'll put the webinar on the YouTube channel underneath it, and I'll put the coupon code there. But for someone who's maybe needs to ask themselves about their boundaries, for someone that maybe goes, I wonder, maybe I don't have great boundaries. How can they assess themselves? What can they do to kind of go, maybe Dr. Jake Porter and his boundaries thing, maybe that's true. How do they kind of go through a check? What's the word I'm looking for? An assessment of their own to go, I wonder how my boundaries are doing.
Right. So I got some strong medicine on that point.
Oh, bring it.
Resentment. If you have resentment, you're not doing well on your boundaries. And here's the reason why. Sam, if we, okay, so we were talking before you hit record about you coming through my town. And I said, let's have lunch. And you said, watch out. Well, let's say you start coming, you're showing up here and there more and more often. And every single time you're like knocking on my door, like coming to my office, like you said we could have lunch. Right? And the first time I'm like, oh, this is cute. Sam's here. And I take you to, the Mexican place down the road. And then the next time I'm like, oh, that's nice. He came by again. And then the third time I'm like, okay, this is getting weird. And then the fourth time I don't come to the door. Right? Right. And I'm like, he should have known better. Why is he doing this? Doesn't he know I'm busy? Doesn't he? Right? Especially if I'm picking up the tab every time. Right? So the resentment I feel toward you is because I didn't have good boundaries with you.
Right.
Now, like I said, this is strong medicine. And I'm not talking about the resentment or the hurt. I want to be really clear. I'm not talking about like the hurt of discovering you're betrayed. That is not what I'm talking about.
Right.
But if in this recovery and healing process, I'm resenting that he's not going to his meetings, she's unwilling to do therapy, he won't do this, right? I am not putting up boundaries to protect myself from what this person is or isn't doing. It's tough. It's tough. But
it's so tough. I remember when my therapist said to me, he was walking me through some stuff, and he said, yeah, but you keep signing up for it. And I said, number one, you're wrong. Number two, that was personal. I remember going, he said, you keep signing up for it and you're not setting a boundary, and you wonder why this keeps happening to you. And I remember going, it never struck me in that particular moment to say, wait a minute, I don't have to sign up for this, right? The betrayed. Yeah. Now, man, it's such a good point that you said that, because so many people say, well, anytime somebody says you just need to, I go, oh God, what's coming next, right? And so it isn't just, you just need to set boundaries, but would you think it's safe to say maybe your lack of boundaries is at some level illustrating your lack of love for yourself or value for yourself? Maybe it's identifying that you weren't taught as a child that you were worth boundaries, or that you were worth self-protection. Is it fair?
I think that's totally fair. I think those are all within the realm of possibility. And I want to add this as well, that don't think of boundaries where it's like this all or nothing, 0 or 1. All of a sudden you're going to come in and have this, this perfect system of boundaries for everything in your life. But if you start saying, for example, I'm just going to throw out some examples, like, you know what? If you're unwilling to be regularly seeing a therapist and following his or her recommendations, then I am unwilling to do a check-in with you. And if I'm not doing a check-in with you, I'm going to feel unsafe. I'm not going to feel safe to be intimate and close and those sorts of things. I hope you choose otherwise, right? So let's say you do that. That's one boundary. It's one boundary. What you might gain from setting one boundary is a little bit more clarity, a little bit of stillness to better assess your own reality, to have a better sense of where to go next. Don't think you have to have it all figured out from the get-go, especially, to bring it back to where we started this whole conversation, especially if you're dealing with someone with NPD or strong narcissistic traits. Yeah. Because that is that's a mind something bender.
I think so many betrayeds can feel like, I'm trying so hard to do all the things that should work, whether I went to an intensive or I read this information or I took this course. I'm doing everything that everybody's telling me to do. But Sam, Dr. Porter, it constantly gets thrown back in my face. And so then they try a boundary, and then let's say that it's the unfaithful in this case that tramples on that boundary and continues to trample on their boundaries. I'm teeing this up for you, but when is the time when the betrayed should say, I might be blind to something here. This might be a massive blind spot. Maybe I am continuing to give them the benefit of the doubt at my own expense and hurt. Is there a tipping point? Is there a point that you can tell the betrayed, listen, I know that you could say if you're having massive resentment, that's one, but is there a point where they have to kind of wake up and go, listen, you're justifying their behavior and you're missing the fact that they are doing what they want, how they want, because they have no fear of you enforcing a boundary or standing up for yourself or taking any power within the situation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that point, there is that point when that comes, it's going to be different for different people. Right.
Sure.
I mean, I've worked with betrayed partners who get there in 6 weeks, and some of them it takes 6 years, and some of them take 16 years. I've seen all of those scenarios, but I do think what we're trying to do with betrayed partners is we're trying to empower them in such a way that what's called their locus of control goes from being outside to inside, from an external to an internal locus of control, right? And what happens in a narcissistic relationship is that, and this can happen in a very subtle and sneaky way, it's all one directional.
Right.
There is no mutuality. And even when it feels like there is, they're actually left like, or it's very, very lopsided, right? Yeah. And so what's controlling that, what the concept of the locus of control, what that's referring to is like, what is dictating my choices? Something external to me or internal to me? Yes. And if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist or someone with strong narcissistic traits, and you start getting this awareness that, wow, my whole life is me orbiting them.
Right.
They are the center, and everything about me is about me, my place in their orbit. And when you start loving yourself, respecting yourself, returning to yourself, and saying, this isn't good for me or that person.
Right.
And step by step, turning that around, which it normally does not happen all at once. It's choice by choice. Now I begin to shift that locus of control back to something inside. And with those choices and me taking ownership of my choices, that is what will begin this awakening that I've seen many betrayed partners go through, an awakening. And guess what? For some of them, it does have a ripple effect that then affects their partners who betrayed them.
Yes. I think
in a good way. Yeah.
I agree. And there's a clip that's continuing to make its way all over Instagram with Gabor Mate, who wrote the book, The Myth of Normal, and fantastic guy. He says in this clip, he says, anger is a sign of your boundaries being violated and can be very healthy. And I think, would you agree that many betrayed, while they're devastated, shocked, and there's anger because of what's happened, some of them are terrified to get angry. Some of them are afraid to be angry because of how their unfaithful spouse is going to perceive it. But it's my opinion that it's actually good for them to get angry and not necessarily retaliate, lash out, have this angry demeanor. But isn't it true that anger could be very helpful for them to start to make the choices that they need to make, to do the work that they need to do, to be able to say, look at how much I've tolerated for so long. I can have compassion on myself that I have allowed this to go on, but I can also allow myself to be angry because this is unfair, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Every emotion serves a function, a good, right function, every single emotion. And that doesn't mean in every instance it's serving that good function, but it can, right? There's a purpose for it. And anger, like you said, or I don't know that you use this word, but this is how I say it. Anger is about protecting, right?
Yes.
If someone comes after my kid and I get angry, it's because I'm protecting my kid, right? And that's appropriate. That's appropriate. So if I'm angry, what needs protection here? Now, we get the benefit of a prefrontal cortex that allows us to reflect and regulate so as to not act impulsively on our anger, right?
When it's firing. when it's firing.
When it's firing, exactly. Right. When it's firing, right. And so someone makes some comment to my kid, and there's a part of me that wants to like pop them, clock them, right. But I'm like, hold on, there's a better way to do this. And in my anger, I'm able to step in and maybe I verbally say something or whatever, right? But I'm still letting my anger inform me. So yeah, listen to your anger. It is telling you something. It's informing you of something that's worth protecting.
I think it's masterful the way you took that and said, let it inform you. I think the betrayeds are so desperate for clarity, for insight. It would be so easy if there was just this giant yardstick that every one of them could use to measure their situation up against, right? Yeah. And I thought it was beautiful how you said for some people it is 6 weeks and some people it's 6 years and then it's everything in between. But helping them understand, I think so many betrayeds who deal with a highly narcissistic partner, someone like you or I comes in and goes, you're really not crazy. What you're feeling is legitimate. What you're feeling is valid. How do you, and this will be my last question, how do you help the betrayed kind of peel back the veneer and say, maybe I'm not crazy and there's a problem here. Maybe they've been codependent, or maybe they've been kind of making up excuses to justify the behavior. It's not that bad, or they'll get over it, or so-and-so will help them, but then they don't. How do you help them in that space? Because it's such a painful space to be in.
Yeah. I mean, this is where we need a consult, right? This is where we need, I don't mean literally like a consult with me. This is where we need other voices speaking into our lives. And, I've had the conversation with betrayed partners like, have you checked out a meeting, this support group or this, that? Have you shared your experience? Because let others who've walked similar roads just watch their reaction to your story. Right? Just watch their face as you tell your story. And when it's like that face and 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 that face are all just aghast at what I'm sharing, then, maybe it's worse than I thought. Maybe it's, which is weirdly validating. We hope.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So that's one thing I would say is like, get a consult, get several consults, share your story in safe places, share your story with people who get it, people who walk that road or professionals who would know. That's one thing. The other thing I would say, to help find that reality is start like a log. Okay. Start a journal, a log where you just record the dynamics of what's going on, and use 2 colors of pen. And if the flow of energy in the conversation was going from you toward your partner, use 1 color. And if the flow of energy was going from your partner to you, use another color. And just let reality be the teacher.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is a good point. I think what I loved about today is there was no quick fixes. There was no just do this.
No.
I love that about you because you're gracious to the journey of the unfaithful or the betrayed and their plight, which if we can't do this work with compassion, I don't know that we will really help many people, and I don't know that many people will be very grateful for us. So I'm thoroughly grateful for you. Thank you for coming in. If people want to reach out to you, how do they reach out? How do they find more about your webinar, which we'll put a link in the YouTube post, but how do they learn more about your intensives and how you help people?
Yeah. So there are a few websites you can go to. daringventures.com is my practice. Dr. Jake Porter has a lot of stuff on it. I've got a YouTube channel, Dr. Jake Porter, Instagram, Dr. Jake Porter. There's a lot of ways to reach me. So all of those are good ways to find me. And I've got tons of free information on YouTube and Instagram. So that's where I direct people mostly.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, Dr. Jake, thank you so much. For those of you that are watching or listening, I'm just honored that you would spend this time with us. If I can be of any help, if you want to reach out to me and come with me when I go stalk Dr. Jake to have lunch every day next week, you can reach me at samshealingpodcast@gmail.com. Dr. Jake, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.
For coming in.
Appreciate you.